right, guys, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce. Thank you so much for your company this morning. I do appreciate you. And I'm going to be looking out for your comments and your feedback as we go along with the show. Once again, the SMS line is 22999. You can also reach me on social media at SwitchTVKE on Instagram and at SwitchTV Kenya on Facebook and Twitter. And just to see those of you who are engaging with us this morning, let me throw out a couple shout outs here. Mokaya Leadership Consulting, you say you're watching us from Nairobi CBD. Do Samuel from Meru County. Future Boyka from Jinja, Uganda, you're streaming us live. Asante sana for that. Daphne Moke watching us from Kasarani. Pauline Ndirangu from Karatina. Otoyo Jaworo, you're watching us from Racecourse, Nairobi. Gabriel Gadecha Muritu as well. Faith Anjeri, Sophie Starlin, and so many others of you. I'm going to be getting to your feedback and comments as we go along with the show. Now, before I introduce my guest, I want to touch on some of the things that I'm seeing, a lot of people are talking about on social media. And today I want you guys to be the ones to comment on it, okay? 22999 is the SMS line. So one of the biggest hashtags right now is on the impeachment hearing of President Donald Trump in the US. Now, President Trump, of course, there's an impeachment hearing against him. It seems to really be gaining a lot of traction and a lot of momentum, and lots of people commenting about it online. That is certainly a trending topic in the US and around the world today. Someone here says, I know I have every reason not to feel it, but I do. Hope that the public will turn on him. Hope that his poll numbers plummet. Hope that Senate Republicans abandon him. Hope that they convict the criminal, they say. Hope that we might have a President Pelosi. Oh my goodness, very strong sentiments there by one Brian Tache on Twitter. It's been long clear, someone else says, but it's never been more clear than today. Donald Trump is unfit for office. He must be impeached, says another person elsewhere. And of course, one of the things that is trending, and we can get this on your screens shortly, is Donald Trump's notes, okay? His hand notes were spotted as he was speaking to reporters on the White House lawn before departing on his flight to somewhere. But this is what this is what his notes had. I want nothing. I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky to do the right thing. This is the final word from the President of the United States. Very interesting that this would form the actual press statements, of the President of the United States. And lots of people have, really commented about that. But another topic that's trending that I also want you guys to comment upon is JQuat once again is trending. Okay, it is alleged that the insecurity issue is getting out of hand. Someone says here that the government needs to do something now. This is because apparently or allegedly a JQuat student has been stabbed in Gashororo outside Safari Hostel Gate. The situation at Juja is getting out of hand and must be contained. This is the problem of involving thugs to join the police to stop peaceful demonstrations. The thugs elevate themselves to untouchables. Someone else here says, as Secretary General of the Kenya University Students' Union, I'm deeply saddened by yet another killing of an innocent comrade in Juja. How many lives do we have to lose for the authorities to come to senses that all is not well? Cindy Brenda 5 also on Twitter says, I cannot even imagine any parent receiving news that your child has been killed. Yani, this is not even something I can wish on my enemies. Luya with attitude, Waluvengo Barak says, long ago, villagers used to fear university students. Nowadays, villagers are bitter jobless graduates. They have no respect for students whatsoever. As you guys can hear from these comments, very strong sentiments coming out of what's been happening in Juja. DFK Onyamokami says, when society eats its youth, when those tasked with keeping us safe are instead killing us, when a young person is murdered yet government says nothing, we are on our own. This here is government that ate its people. Oh my goodness. Ngare Rachel says, does it even make sense that we are not seeing police officers everywhere, despite the recent situation in Juja? Kwani, what is so hard to understand here? Insecurity in an area means that that place should be very carefully watched and patrolled. Someone else saying Juja is no longer safe. Stop forcing us to stay in an environment that is not safe. And in fact, someone here points to a story saying that insecurity in Juja has gone to another level. A lady known as Auntie Ruth was found murdered by some people this morning. The lady, who was a member of PCA Juja and lived at sewage along Kiongo Street, was shot yesterday around 9 p.m. To the family, friends, and members of PCA Dhuri, may God comfort you. Rest in peace, Mama Waithera. Very sad sentiments as far as what is going on in Juja, and I'd love to know what you guys think about it. 22999 is the SMS line. Let me know what you think concerning this story. I'll see if we can touch on some other current affairs topics later on. But for now, allow me to introduce my guest this morning. As I mentioned, today on Viewpoint, we want to talk about promoting justice for children. And here with me, I'm very pleased to have Justice Lucy Gitari, a High Court judge and a member of the Children's Task Force. Thank you so much for joining us and for your time. And you're based in Kerugoya.
Yes.
Yes, so we really do appreciate in Kirinyaga County.
Yes.
Excellent. It's really great to have you here. Now, children encounter the justice system as victims, sometimes witnesses, either because they're in conflict with the law or as parties to a justice process. But how exactly does this work? Is there justice for our children? And what protection programs are there in cases of, say, child labor, child abuse, or violence against children? That's what we want to talk about with my guests today. And in fact, today is actually Universal Children's Day. Yesterday was International or Universal Children's Day. So, your justice, there's actually a task force, you said, on children. Why is this day important? Why set up even the task force on children?
Okay, thank you. The day, International Day of the Child, is important because it's a day that we look at the rights of the child. This day commemorates the passing of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And the judiciary had established a task force on children matters under the umbrella of the National Council on Administration of Justice, which is chaired by the Chief Justice. It brings together the actors in the justice system. Now, this task force was established, one, because with the coming of the new Constitution, we had Article 53 of the Constitution for the first time in the country and in our Constitution, recognizing the rights of the child and talking about the rights of the child. So what the task force was supposed to do was to come up with recommendations and also to look at how what is there in the country and to streamline the law that is there on the children with the Article 53 of the Constitution, which addresses the rights of the child. Now, when the children come to the justice system, they are various actors, which we are now identifying as the chain link in the justice system. From the time the child is taken to the police station as a child in conflict with the law. And of course, unfortunately, the children also encounter the police, not because they have committed any crime, but because they are in need of care and protection. I'm sure you know police, when they are doing a roundup or a raid, for example, even in Nairobi town, they arrest everybody, even children who are found in the streets. Some of these children are not criminals. They are children in need of care and protection. So, and we wanted to identify and differentiate the different regimes of the law that should apply when these children come to court or come into the justice system. They start at the police station, and the police are supposed to present them in court.
Yeah.
We have courts established under the Children's Act, and these courts are supposed to handle children, so that when we are dealing with children in the justice system, we look at the best interest of the child.
Okay.
Now, we had to look at the gaps in the law and also make recommendations how those gaps can be addressed.
Perhaps before we get to some of those recommendations,
Yes.
It would be remiss of me not to ask about this, because I know it's on the minds of a lot of Kenyans,
Yes.
particularly when you talk about how children, you know, in some ways will still engage with the police.
Yes.
And one of the cases that have, of course, has remained very publicly is the case of baby Pendo, who was shot and killed by a bullet, right, during the last election. And a lot of people wonder today, why hasn't justice prevailed for that young child? Are you able to comment on that?
Well, I can comment because the child was killed, and I believe there was justice for that child because the matter was followed. The matter went to court, and an inquest was held. Of course, when somebody dies in some circumstances where you cannot pin down on somebody who has committed that crime, what happens is that an inquiry is held.
Okay.
Police collect evidence, and that evidence is presented in court by witnesses, and they give evidence before the court, and then the court makes recommendations. In this case, an inquest was held and recommendations were made. Now, arising from those recommendations, it is now for the agency concerned to implement those recommendations.
Right.
So, for example, if the court identifies that this policeman was culpable, it is for the DPP, of course, to take action against whoever was culpable and charge him in court. And then the process will start. If, for example, you cannot pin down on who in particular shot that child, and the child was, the court proved that the child was shot by the police, then the next process is to compensate the parents of that child by maybe paying them damages. Yes, and again, it has to go to court. If the Attorney General does not pay damages straight, or they don't agree with the parents on what kind of damages, then they have to come to court for the court to decide on what damages or how to compensate the parents.
Right. But at this point, for baby Pendo, then the inquest was made, and it's almost like a silent story now, and so many of us don't even know what's happening with that case.
Of course, now once the court has made a decision, it is now for the other actors now to come in and follow it up.
And by that,
because
do you
the
mean
court
the
has
police?
made the recommendations as to what happened, or was there somebody culpable who should be charged, who should be blamed, and then after that, then the court, the action is taken. It may not even be the DPP, but based on the finding of the magistrate in the inquest, even the parents of the child should seek justice.
Right. And perhaps you can help our viewers understand that a little better just before we move on from this topic.
Yes.
Because in many ways, one would expect that the justice system is the one to sort of direct what should be done. And so I think a lot of people are struggling with the idea of the recommendations for the court to make and then wait for another body to come in and implement, and maybe there's been, you know, some slow movement on that, but you know, I think many people would expect that the court would sort of rule or make a directive that this is the law and this is what is going to happen.
Yes, actually that is what was expected to happen, and I believe it happened because the magistrate gave a ruling on the inquest. And you see, for us courts, once you make an order, it's for the person who now came to court to follow up. Because the court has done its work by saying, this is what happened, the so-and-so should be charged, or the child, the parents of the children should be compensated.
Right.
You see, the court cannot follow up. You give a judgment, and then those affected will follow it up.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So these agencies that are involved are the ones now that we should really be pursuing for the final answers to this solution.
Of course, including the parents of the child.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
To pursue, to make sure that there is justice for the child.
Right.
By following it up to see that, if you keep quiet, nobody will follow it up. And if it is for the police, I'm sure the police should be able to take action. If it is the DPP who is supposed to charge, then he's the person supposed to take action.
All right.
The ruling of the court should guide them on what should happen, because that is why an inquiry is held.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm here talking to Justice Lucy Gitari, who's the High Court judge and a member of the Children's Task Force. We were just discussing Baby Pendo, the late Baby Pendo, and it's in the larger discussion of promoting justice for children. And when we come back from this break, we want to hear a little bit more about, what are some of the recommendations that are being put forth as far as protecting the rights of children in this country from abuse, violence, and just maintaining their innocence too, even as they grow up. This and so much more when we return. Do remember to send in your questions to 22999. We'll be back shortly. All right, guys, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce, and thank you for engaging with us this morning. Once again, you can send us your feedback on 22999. You can also reach us on social media at SwitchTVKE on Instagram and at SwitchTV Kenya on Facebook and Twitter. Today, we are talking about promoting justice for children. And just before the break, of course, I was here with Justice Lucy Gitari, who's a High Court judge and a member of the Children's Task Force. And we're now joined by Ruth Juliet Gashanja, who's an advocate of the High Court, a child's rights technical advisor, and also sits on the National Council of Administration of Justice Task Force on Child Matters as well. Karibu sana to the show.
Thank you.
And welcome back again, Lady
Thank
Justice. Now, as we continue talking about promoting justice for children, just yesterday, of course, we said was Universal Day of Children, and actually you guys released a report on some of the issues that I guess, the justice system needs to bridge as far as promoting children's rights and protecting them from abuse and violence. So, Lady Justice, maybe I can first ask you, what informed doing this report, first of all?
Of course, as I said earlier, what informed this report is of course, the NCJ put in place the task force. This task force was supposed to look into the situation of the child in the justice system.
Right.
Of course, we were supposed to address the gaps, and we were given the terms of reference. And what we did is to go around the country. We did not sit down in the boardroom and decide what is required. So we went to the ground. We visited police stations to see how children are held at the police stations, and we also went to the institutions where children are held.
Okay.
We interviewed children, we interviewed the people running those institutions. We did a physical visit to the holding institutions, especially at the police stations, which are supposed to have a place for holding the child.
Did most of them have places for holding the children?
No, most of them did not have, and even those which existed were not what is envisaged under the Children's Act and the Constitution, because children are supposed to be held separate from adults.
Right.
And in most of these stations, we found that the cell is just next to the adult cells. They are sharing the facilities.
Wow.
There is nothing really which we could say this is special for the child. Of course, in some police stations like Buruburu, we found a child protection unit which was operational. Of course, there are difficulties and challenges,
Right.
because you find the people manning those child protection units are not qualified, do not have any special training. And we also visited courts, and we did what we were calling service weeks for the cases involving children.
Okay.
And we realized that the children's cases were not treated in a special way.
Well, let me pause there as I bring you into this discussion, because that's really deplorable. And immediately one can think of all the sorts of different vices a child in a prison cell with an adult could be faced with. On top of it, to have officers or security personnel there who are not even qualified or well qualified to handle children. Who is supposed to be responsible for that? Because Lady Justice is saying that there's an actual act that is supposed to govern how children are treated in cells. So who is responsible for that, and why hasn't it been done yet?
You know, worst off is the fact that we went to Naivasha police station, found a child who's been there for 6 months.
How old?
And a 15-year-old boy who'd been there for 6 months. So imagine sleeping on the cold cell on the floor for 6 months just to wait for the case to go on. Now, one of the questions we asked as a task force is the question you asked: who's the responsible person? The Department of Children's Services has mandates over all the children in this country. And it doesn't matter where they are, in the justice system, out there in the world, you know, children at home. So the Department of Children's Services is really, really responsible. And children, according to the Children Act, the children should not be spending time in a cell. There are remand homes that are run by the Department of Children's Services where children should actually be taken in the process of trial. But ideally, the Children Act also says in the offender rules that children really should be released back to their parents. However, one of the things we noticed is that there's a bit of silence on something we call diversion of children cases, where we divert the children completely from the justice system, so that they don't ever get into the courtrooms, into the police stations. So that is one of the lacunas that we realized, which actually will be addressed by the Children Bill.
So that diversion is something that you want to do?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's the best option for children, because we realize that every place the child walks into in the justice chain, the child comes out a different person.
And speaking of which, actually, I believe one of the highlights or things that came out of your report, one of the findings, was that children older than 4 tend to be separated from their mothers who are serving jail terms.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And so they're separated from their mothers within the jail system or the prison system, or are they released outside of the prison system? What happens?
Actually, what happens is that when a mother walks into the prison with a child, we realize that there is no record kept for that child. Because what the prison says is that they keep prisoners, not children. But we are happy that the prison officers have been taking care of those children. But according to the prison's regulations, once a child gets to 4 years, even if the mother is still serving the sentence, that child has to leave the prison.
Released to the rest of the family?
To the family, but he cannot remain in the prison after he or she attains the age of 4 years.
Okay.
That is why we are saying after 4 years, the child is separated from the mother, because if the mother is still serving the sentence, that child has to leave the mother in the prison and be released to relatives.
And in your findings, the surveys that you did you find that most prisons were compliant with that?
Yes, they were compliant. Yes, but what we found is that if you ask today who are the children in the prisons, because they are not recorded. They don't record. Their mothers who go there when they are pregnant and they give birth, but there is no record in the prisons to show when that child was born, that the child is in the prison. We found that there is a lacuna there which needs to be addressed. Yes.
Yeah, and maybe if I could add something. It's actually pointing to one of our findings in the broken justice chain. Yes. So the justice chain is supposed to be complete, but ours is sort of broken. So where we do not understand or we don't know where the child goes to. So even after the child, for instance, is released from prison, there is no system that says we're going to follow up on this child. And rehabilitate them. And even, support them, because their mothers or their primary caregivers are actually in prison. So that is a broken chain, which is one of our critical findings within our report, that we don't know when the child gets into the system, whether they are children in conflict, whether they are victims, whether they are children of caregivers who are in prison. We do not have a proper process that says this child is actually going to exit the system and they're going to be protected at the exit of the system.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about children who do find themselves in trouble with the law.
Yes.
Right? But they are minors. Does Kenya have a very established juvenile detention system of any sort, because there are a lot of claims and I think findings that children do find themselves sort of having to go through the adult institutions of justice. And how is the task force trying to address that today?
Okay, the law is there because we have the Children's Act. Although as a task force, we realized that there were various recommendations which we needed to be made in the Children's Act. And what the Act says is that when a child is charged in a magistrate's court, that case should be concluded in 3 months. But rarely do we see that. We see the child being handled in the justice system just like any other adult offender. And so there are delays, and we came across children who have stayed in the justice system for a very long time.
Yeah.
And what we are recommending is that just like we are doing with election petitions, we have to put a time limit within which a child who comes to the justice system, that his case is decided within a given time. And you cannot extend that time, because our emphasis is that this child is supposed to be in school, but when we hold him for so long in the justice system, you know, of course, you are wasting his time.
Sure. And
we need to make sure that that child goes to school, is released back to the parents, or at least he knows the outcome of the case, because we have other... In the justice chain, we have the next process. So if a child is found guilty and is supposed to be committed in an institution, that institution is there. And then we are expecting that that institution will be able to handle that child and address all his rights and all the requirements of that child before he attains the age of 18 years. Because we have like, we have like the Boston institutions, where a child is committed before, and is supposed to be there until he attains the age of 18 years.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, because actually currently the age of criminal responsibility is quite low. The Children's Act of 2001 makes a child as young as 8 years old criminally culpable. And this has resulted in children as young as 9 to 12 years languishing in child holding institutions. And then there's the questions of quality of those institutions, the care in those institutions, whether there's actually opportunity for those children to be rehabilitated, so that hopefully by the time they're coming out, you know, they can fit right into society today. So that, of course, is one issue. Why is that? It's puzzling that on the one hand, the same act says a child can only be there until 4 years old, but they could be put back in, you know, just 4 years later. Right, as a criminal, like criminally culpable. Secondly, other issues are things like radicalization, and what is the act, or what is the task force recommending as far as radicalization is concerned, as well as child trafficking, which still seems to be quite a pervasive issue in Kenya. So as we get ready to wrap up, maybe you can touch on any one of those issues.
All right. So a couple of things we just need to understand is that the child from 8 years all the way, you know, to 18, they can find themselves in the justice system. The longest they can spend in a rehabilitation center is about 3 years. The minimum trial period is about a year. So you're looking at a child who walks into the justice system as a, you know, as an offender at say 9 years, takes about a year to finish their case, so that's 10 years, and then 3 years in the justice system, that's 13 years. So they leave as a teenager. That means that essentially their, you know, their formative life has actually been taken away by the justice system. Even worse, what we discovered is that the remand homes do not have even formal education, which is the other gap that we realized when we were doing our report. And we said as a task force that there is actual need to, first of all, that the Ministry of Education needs to put education in this remand home, so that these children, in as much as they have offended, that they continue with their education. And then when it comes to radicalization, one of the huge gaps is rehabilitation. You see, radicalization can only work if it can only be countered by de-radicalization. And it's not about putting a child away in a remand home or in a rehabilitation center or in a postal institution for years. It has to be a process of rehabilitation. And there's actually what you call the Neuchâtel Memorandum, which was signed by a couple of countries just I think 2016, and it focuses on rehabilitating children who are radicalized.
Has Kenya signed on to it?
We are part of it, and we are working, towards it for the cases. So we said, let us not focus on really taking the children to the justice system. One of the key things that the task force is saying is we must divert and use alternative mechanisms to deal with children in the justice system. Okay. Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Lady Justice Lucy, maybe in your final statements as well, talk to us then about, what would you say are some of the biggest, most pertinent recommendations coming out of this report? There's a number of issues here. This one for police cells to me is very scary, in fact, because that's the point of contact that we run to when we feel unsafe, and yet to think that our children are not safe in those police cells is very worrying. But maybe we can have your final comments.
Thank you. Actually, what we said is that we came up with what we called fast and furious recommendation, which the actors in the justice system for the child should take immediately. And this is the enactment of the Children's Bill. Because in the Children's Bill, which is now pending for introduction in Parliament, we have made our recommendations. We have made laws which addresses the new issues which are coming up, like radicalization, like the cyber crimes. We have also made recommendations, and we have made regulations and rules which should govern the establishment of those child protection units in the police stations. We have also made recommendations on people who should man them, that they should be trained to handle children. So as a task force, we feel that these gaps can be addressed immediately if the Children's Bill is passed into law.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to the both of you, Ruth Juliet Gashanja, asante sana for your time, Justice Lucy Gitari as well, High Court Judge. We really do appreciate your time as well and your insights. Guys, do be on the lookout for this. I'm sure you can find some of these findings online, so be sure to look out for that, even as we hope for a change in the justice system for the sake of our children. And with that said, we're going to take a break now. Our time is far spent. We need to get ready for our second hour, where today we're looking at change makers. And of course, these are people doing amazing things to influence the societies around them. And so that's coming up next on Full Circle with Joyce. Stay tuned.